Speak the charm of me, charm of me, charm of me, charm.
There will come a time on the planet Earth when science and technology will be long forgotten, when wizards will rule the world.
This is the Arnemancy Podcast. The world is weirder than we know. Join your host, Reverend Eric, and his diverse array of amazing guests in an exploration of tarot, magic, the occult, and the history of Western esotericism. The Arnemancy Podcast exists thanks to the support of generous listeners like you. Please consider supporting this podcast for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/arnemancy. Welcome back to the Arnemancy Podcast. This is the second part of the episode we have all been waiting for. Part 2 of the 2022 Year Ahead Forecast. I am your host and the moderator, Reverend Eric, and I am joined by my two amazing friends, cartomancer Susan Chang, T. Susan Chang, and astrologer Andrew B. Watt. If you want more info on what we're doing, I would advise you to go back and listen to part 1 of the forecast. And now we're going to get into some introductions. Susie, would you like to introduce yourself,
Sure.
please?
I am T. Susan Chang, but my friends call me Susie, and all of you are now my friends. I read tarot. I write about tarot. I teach tarot. I talk about tarot. I live and breathe tarot, basically. My website is www.tsusanchang.com. And I also have an Etsy shop where you can buy my products, which are zodiacal perfumes, including custom astrological perfumes based on your big three, and also lots and lots of tarot cases and talismans. I think that's and the URL for that is www.etsy.com/shop/tarotista.
Excellent. And Andrew, how about you? Who the heck are you?
I first want to express admiration for Susie for getting a basic word like tarotista as her shop name. That was brilliant.
Yeah, it is surprising,
I have a shop,
right?
I have an Etsy shop which is called Water Mountain Studio, and that's a mouthful to say and a mouthful to type.
But memorable.
But memorable. My website is andrewbwatt.com. I think this is the third time that we've done the year ahead forecast episode for the Arnemancy. And I've also been on a couple of times for other things like sewing and magic, which should definitely be another Susie, Andrew, and Eric episode in the near future.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, we're sitting here watching Susie crochet or
Crochet,
knit something.
yeah, crochet snowflakes.
Oh, right, crocheting snowflakes.
Right, because it's not like we're not going to have enough snow in New England.
Yeah, but Susie's crocheted snowflakes keep you warm.
They keep your idle hands busy is the idea.
Yeah.
How very New England Puritan of you.
So all three of us are running a sale on divination services up through the last day of 12th night, which is January 5th. You can use the code BIGASTRO22 to get 20% off any of our divination services. You can find links to those services on our respective websites. And there also will be links in the show notes to those services. And the code BIGASTRO shouldn't make you believe that you're going to get astrological readings from all of us. Susie and I are offering tarot readings. Andrew is offering astrology and geomancy. And he's the one who picked the code. So that's why it's sort of,
right. And even
but
though
Susie picked next year's code, and it's brilliant.
And just because the code is Big Astro doesn't mean that any of you or any of us have a big ass.
I mean, no promises. There might be some big asses here.
It's radio. Live in fantasy.
We've all got asses for radio, that's for sure. Okay, now, in the first half of this, we sort of set up all of the rules. Andrew went over the solar return chart for the year. Susie drew the card of the year, which is strength. But if you want to hear more about that, listen to the first part of this forecast. And we covered January through June. And it did feel, we were talking a little bit before we started recording again. It did feel a little pessimistic, like we didn't necessarily end on an upbeat note. But so, we have I've got a lot of hopes for this next part, the chart for July, which I'm looking at, and Andrew hasn't started talking about yet, is much more exciting. There are planets all over the place, and we've got like some great looking angles and things, which it's geometrically more interesting to look at.
It's definitely more geometrically interesting
good,
to look
Andrew,
at.
or is it good?
Well, that's an excellent question. The chart is the sun at 10 degrees of Cancer, 44 minutes, 2nd of July, 2022 at 11:14 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We're a location over Western Massachusetts. Susie and I live not exactly within spitting distance of the Connecticut River running through Springfield, Massachusetts, but
Close enough.
this is the meridian of Springfield, Massachusetts, which, as we all know, is the center of the universe.
I've heard that it's a mob town, so it's really big on organized crime there in Springfield.
Yes, where we live in a part of the country which is called the Happy Valley in
That's
Western
right.
Massachusetts. But the towns where we live are called Behind the Tofu Curtain.
Yes. Precisely. Right. Which just tells you.
So tell us about the chart, Andrew. Tell us about the chart. It's good, isn't it? It's good. I can tell.
Well, as we said in the first episode, Venus is the queen of the year, Saturn is the prime minister, and the monthly governor for this chart is Mercury. And you can hear about how we select those in sort of the first 20 minutes of part 1. In this particular case, Venus is now in Gemini. She is not quite in her own term, so technically she's peregrine, but she's not all that far away from being in a place where she helps everyone get together right now. So this is looking favorable for U.S. residents to have a really nice 4th of July, 5th of July, that sort of period around our big holiday. France may have similar conditions for Bastille Day on July 14th. I think this is very good. At the same time, that level of peregrineness suggests that there's going to be a fair bit of bosses, managers, supervisors, anyone with some sort of supervisory responsibility trying to figure out how to get the economy up and running again, especially after all these months of it not running, and being divided on how to do that. So partial successes, partial failures, partial divinity because of the Gemini, but also partial mortality because it's Gemini. That's sort of the way that it works. Venus wants to have everything all the ways that it's possible to have it, and some things are just going to fall apart because of that.
Yeah, I could see, July is a tough time to get the economy running again because everybody wants to go on vacation.
Right.
Right. In our last chart, we saw some very favorable things for the working classes in the 6th house. We had a pileup of planets in Taurus there, and in this chart, we just have Saturn there. And that suggests that some of the ways that they may have pushed to represent themselves and gain ground in the current economy may also be facing some kind of pushback and limitation from Saturn. Mercury is in Gemini, and that again is the 10th house in this chart. Mercury is just a little bit to the left of the midheaven, suggesting a prominence for expertise and a prominence for talking heads and pundits who seem to know what they're talking about. So I think that in July, we are likely to see fewer elected leaders and more senior experts up on stage explaining why a specific set of actions is being taken. And I think that seeing revered senior experts on stage is likely to be a big part of July.
Okay.
Spokespeople. Yes.
Of course, we're saying this as the three of us are currently
That's
talking
right.
heads.
Yeah, it's true.
Yes.
It's worth noting, though, that Mercury here is in the third decan of Gemini, which is called the Executioner's Sword, which is the idea of wielding administrative power to make things happen. And so I think that that's a big part of Mercury's role this month, is getting stuff to happen because they're the experts and they know what's going on.
Well, I call that decan famous last words. So we'll see.
Oh.
Executioner's swords work both ways, of
That's
course.
right.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's we've got Bastille Day.
That's
month,
right.
and I can always. Let's not talk about guillotines. Is there a tarot card for guillotine? Susie, pull us
Okay, let's see what
pull
we
us a
got.
guillotine card.
Well, we've got the Two of Wands, actually. All right.
More wands?
Yeah, more wands. This is the year of fire, it seems. You know, I mean, the fact that we keep pulling wands does indicate that I think there will be a general...
That you're not shuffling very well.
I think there's going to be a general theme of the whole planet overheating, honestly. You know, I mean, because wands are
God.
fiery, and we are seeing... you know, we've just seen this. We've had the Four of Wands. We've had the year start with Strength, which is fiery. It's Leo. We had the Four of Wands. We've had the Ace of Wands. We've had the Nine of Wands. And now we have the Two of Wands. So the Two of Wands is famously aggro. It's the Lord of Dominion. It's looking to conquer. It's got all of the energy that we associate with the spring equinox. And so I would expect this to be a month rather, where seizure is in the news. Now that could be, you know, literal seizure of territories, for example. That's the sort of thing that could happen. You know, and one thing that I've noticed about this card, which has just sort of arisen for me personally, is that it has to do with calendar systems for some reason. Because of its association with the spring equinox. Sometimes I would not be surprised if there was some sort of like year ahead type planning going on with this. I don't know why, but I'm just throwing it out there so I can be right later.
Okay, that's cool. I'll probably be like republishing this episode a lot, like right before July,
Okay,
which will definitely prompt, you know, listeners to be doing
some course
ahead.
correction.
Yes.
It's also worth noting that Jupiter is in the first decan of Aries, right? Which is associated with the Two of Wands. So there is that sense of authority and leadership taking on the role of reestablishing norms. We're setting our two sticks in the ground and we're saying this is ours.
That's right. It's also worth noting that in the United States, at least, this is a midterm election year. So, you know, the campaigns are going to be in full gear, and we'll be all hearing about that.
Gerrymandering, perhaps.
Gerrymandering, yes, and that's actually interesting because of the imagery on the Two of Wands with the, you know, and the man holding the globe in his hand. You know, there is definitely, there could be some packing and cracking going on in there.
You know, Susie, you brought up all of this stuff about leaders and stuff. And so did Andrew with his interpretation of Venus. So that's going to be July might be a really interesting month for watching the news.
Yes.
So I would say if you don't have an air conditioner, make sure that you invest in an air conditioner
sooner rather than later.
It's going to be warm, but also you're going to want to watch like the Daily Show or whatever, because it's probably going to be very entertaining.
Well, also the two major arcana associated with the Two of Wands are the Tower and the Emperor. So, you know, between the two of them, you can imagine enormous amount of, you know, disruption at the highest levels of government.
Yeah, tension, trying to hold on while everything falls apart.
Right.
All right, I have to ring the bell on myself now. It's time for August. Andrew, give us the skinny.
Venus is in Cancer, and she's in the middle decan of Cancer. She's actually in the last degree of that middle decan, which is called the walled garden. The chart is the sun in Leo at Leo 1044 on the 2nd of August, 2022 at 9:33 p.m. for our Western Massachusetts location. Venus is in the 5th house in this chart, which is where she takes her joy. So this looks like the queen is taking a month off from responsibilities, sex, drugs, rock and roll, happiness, as long as you have a ticket and some kind of a vaccination document to get in. So there's that on her front, but we've also got Jupiter in Aquarius still. And now Jupiter is retrograde in that 3rd decan of Aquarius called the Knot from Austin Coppock's system. So untangling and unraveling messes. And there are things that we said were going to happen in June and July, and now some of that is being walked back by the fact that Saturn has gone retrograde.
Saturn. I think you said Jupiter. This would be Saturn. Yeah.
Sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is Saturn. So maybe we didn't have as clear an idea about what we should do as we thought we should do, as we did a couple of months ago. Now, we've seen this pattern over and over again during COVID, where the experts say, oh, you should do this. And then 2 months later, well, the data suggests that we should do something else. And that's how science works, right? But from the question of designing policy, it's terrible because it makes the government look wishy-washy. And so we've got some more of this going on into August. The governor of the month is Jupiter. And Jupiter is in Aries, and he is just gone retrograde in that 1st decan, in the 2 of Wands decan, which is called the double-bladed axe. So he's not only reviewing what he's done, he's also grinding exceedingly fine bits of shavings off of the 2 of Wands as fire starter.
Oh boy.
I like that.
And this is happening in the 2nd house. So I think what we might see is banking authorities and securities experts coming in and actually taking a look at banks and in an auditory function and saying, hey, are you actually ready for the next kind of stress test? Are you ready for the next? Yeah, like this looks a whole lot like a change of regulatory environment.
Well, that sounds annoying, but that probably means that I personally will have a lot of work in the last half of the year, since I end up writing about regulatory stuff a
No
lot.
kidding.
I mean, no listener wants to hear about my mundane job. So
It's your Clark Kent persona.
yeah, I don't wear glasses when I'm doing Clark Kent. it's the reverse. Nobody can recognize me. It's bizarre. Let's hear the
All
card.
right.
Susie, pull us a card.
August. Oh wow! Look, it's the 9 of Swords.
Oh, great.
Okay, let's delete this recording and start over.
Well, I mean, you have to get it sometime, but I mean, nobody is ever thrilled to see the 9 of Swords, really. I mean, what can we say? I mean, the 9 of Swords is another one of those tough cookies, and
I like to call them shitty cards.
well, you can certainly do that, and no one will stop you. It's your show.
Okay.
But I mean, it is a card where fear has a tendency to take the lead, for better or for worse. And I think that this is a card where people's fears can kind of take a reality that is greater than necessary. It's also a card of, that speaks to the power of the imagination. I don't think that these cards that we draw, whether they appear negative or positive, have to therefore manifest in a negative or positive way. It could just be that there is, this kind of ideation comes to the foreground. It could even be in some kind of cultural phenomenon, that takes over. That's a dystopian show or something like that. It doesn't have to be a living nightmare for all of us, but there is always that
That's true.
possibility.
We do have the moon in the decan that's represented by the Nine of Swords, which I think is the second decan of Libra.
No. That would be it's Nine of Swords is a second Gemini.
Second Gemini.
Yeah.
What? Sorry, miscalculated.
That's
there.
okay.
Sorry,
No big deal.
I take it back. It didn't happen.
But
When I want to keep up with Susie and which card goes to which deck, and I usually just open her book up. But...
well, you know what this seems like it could correspond to me. And because the coronavirus is a respiratory illness, it's an illness of air, and so is this card. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw another variant arising, because everyone will be like this if that happens. Variants are arising all the time, but one that maybe makes the headlines in the same way that Omicron and Delta did.
Do you think once they get finished with the Greek alphabet, they're going to move to Hebrew?
I was wondering about that. And I was also thinking, what
have, like,
happened
the
to
Dottie
epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, iota, kappa, lambda, mu, nu, and xi? Because we never heard about those guys.
They were boring
guess.
ones. But then they did announce that they skipped a bunch of names.
Right. There are a few that just don't work
because
well because they're like too short, or and I heard that they skipped Xi because it would look like Chinese Premier Xi, which is a degree of deference I'm surprised to hear about from the World Health Organization.
China's got nukes.
Yeah, that's true.
So
True.
I related to this idea of sort of a card of concern. We have a Uranus-Mars conjunction in Taurus on about July 30th. And those frequently mean sudden upsets, rash decisions, or explosions. And this one is occurring in the third house. So
wow.
Take it cautiously about the 29th of July through the 1st of August. But that could, in fact, be the nervous energy that you're seeing here in the Nine of Swords.
Yeah. Another thing that comes to mind with the Nine of Swords is the idea of forced choice, because, it's Gemini, so there's two sides of the coin always, but having to decide is like, the whole story of the 8, 9, and 10 of Swords is the story of killing the twin. So, it's hard sometimes to make that choice. And it could be like, for example, the whole sort of your money or your life situation we had with businesses during the pandemic, right? Or, or you have to, we might have some kind of mandate where you have to be vaccinated or you have to go through these sort of proofs to stay employed, something like that.
You brought up the killing of the twin, and one of the things that I have sort of noticed from a cultural framework is that there has been an enormous cultural upheaval around the characters from the Good Omens TV show.
Is that true?
Aziraphale and Crowley.
Yeah.
There's a whole movement of people who are in the sort of pagan and pagan adjacent community who have referred to them as the ineffable husbands. and I think that they are the resurgent Dioscuri. I think that they're the new representation of the Dioscuri in sort of modern paganism. And the Dioscuri are the sons of Zeus, Castor, and Pollux. And in traditional mythology, they are here to protect humanity from the storms and tumults that the gods whip up for their own entertainment and forget that there are mortals in the way. And that's exactly what Aziraphale and Crowley do in the TV show, is they're protecting humanity from the machinations of heaven and hell. So,
of course, in the classics, Theseus kills one of them.
Yeah. With an axe made of many parts that have all been replaced.
On that
note.
Did I hear the tinkle of a bell?
You heard the tinkle of the bell. It is time for September.
All right.
The month that says it's the 7th, but it's actually number 9. Give us the astro lowdown there, Mr. Watt.
Venus is in the end of Leo. She's about to pass into Virgo, where she is in fall. So the queen is about to go into exile. This is not great for the management of the kingdom. and she's going to be trying to connect what doesn't want to be connected. Saturn is still in Aquarius, as he will be for at least like another 6 or 10 months, something like that, and retrograde and still in the knot. So Venus is trying to connect things, and Saturn is saying, no, 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 pull those things apart. Don't let those things touch. Got to keep them separated. And this looks like more COVID restrictions, and the Prime Minister and Venus being at odds with one another. Jupiter is the monthly governor. We talked about him in the second decan of Aries. So I think that whatever arose in when we saw Jupiter first there and we drew the Two of Wands is ongoing, but before it was in the second house. So it was below the horizon. Now it's in the 10th house. It is publicly known. So we may, whatever that Two of Wands stuff was about starts out below the horizon, but now it's public information and it's wide open and people are noticing it.
Okay.
That makes sense.
All right, Susie, you got a card for us? Maybe something that isn't a sword or a wand.
It's the Chariot, as a matter of fact. So that's a change of pace, right? So the Chariot is watery, first of all. So that's something. Any disasters that happen this month will be flood related.
Oh, great.
How exciting.
How exciting. Hurricane, storm surge, flood related type stuff in September, which is very normal. I'm sorry to sound so cheery about it, but that does track. So the Chariot is definitely a card of things kind of racing ahead, literally. We may see some kind of reason that transportation is in the news, whether that means that international travel is either being released or restricted. It could be either, but it's likely to be in the news. It could also be because the Chariot has to do with, it both liquid and in some versions, the Holy Grail, which carries the blood of the Savior. It could have something to do with the coronavirus story and what's happening with, with vaccination, with that which you inject into the bloodstream. So I don't know whether that's going to be another round of boosters or something, but that would make sense given what we saw in the last month.
Do you think, is it going to be a good month for camping? Like, how are the forest fires going to be out west? Can you guys tell at all?
Well, I would
here?
say, rain is actually a good thing if you're concerned about forest fires,
absolutely.
So I think
yes.
the story is going to be more about water than fire, which, might be good for your camping vibe.
Oh, I'm excited about that. That makes me happy. I was sort of thinking about it in the last month. I was like, well, should I ask about camping? Like, can I go camping in August?
Maybe we should draw you a separate card for camping.
Yes, Eric's camping card.
Maybe I'm going to use that big Astro 22 to code to get some readings about camping. Find out when's a good time to go camping.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. Are we ready to move into spooky season?
Yeah, let's.
We are.
Okay, let's go. October.
And for October, Venus, the chart is for the 3rd of October, 2022, 7:28 p.m. This is the sun at 10 degrees Libra, 44 minutes. And for this chart, it's really, I think, quite lovely because Venus is now in Libra and in a position to make her conjunction with the sun. So this is great. She's going to chase the sun all the way through October. And I think it's on October 28th. She actually has her conjunction with the sun at 29 degrees Libra 24, which is sort of
degree.
Like filling in the last bubble on the exam just as the proctor tings the bell and says, please shut your test booklets.
I love that.
So that's good, isn't it?
It's fantastic. If this conjunction occurred in Scorpio, it would mean that the queen was in fall, but it does happen in Libra, even though it's in the last degree. And so I think that this is overall favorable. And this suggests the ending of some of the strikes that might have started earlier in the year with some very favorable conditions for unions, for pay raises, for resolving issues like fairness and healthcare, that sort of thing. But it will come at the cost of some price increases that are likely to fall heavily on coastal U.S. residents, particularly East Coast residents.
Oh, wow.
I won't go into the details of why I think that's true, but that's where I think that's going.
Sucks for us, but it's really interesting.
It sucks for us and really interesting and kind of useful. Saturn is both our monthly governor and prime minister, and he's in the house of career, government actions, reputation, and higher order leadership. But he's square Uranus down in Taurus, so there's this sense of imposing structure on unruly or renegade forces with some forcefulness. So there may be some of those strikes or protests over the course of the summer that get put down, and Saturn is putting the kibosh on some of those forces by October. We have our third solar eclipse on October 25th of this month.
There are squares between Mars and Mercury and Mars and Neptune in your notes.
Yes.
That's important.
A Mars-Neptune, hang on. Why don't you have Susie draw my card, draw the card, and I'm going to look at my notes and figure out what the heck I said here.
Susie, give us the great
Okay,
card.
so this is the card we are talking about for October, and it is the Queen of Swords, which actually echoes quite nicely what Andrew was saying in terms of, fairness, justice. It is a card of Libra primarily, as well as having one decan of Virgo. The last decan of Virgo, but there is definitely no bullshit quality about it. And one thing I noticed from last year about court cards arising during these monthly draws is that somebody might rise to prominence who has a Queen of Swords energy. Like last year, there was Queen of Wands during the July, and that was the month that the conversation was all about Simone Biles, as I recall. I mean, there was a lot of conversation about.
Oh,
Simone
right.
Biles.
Yeah.
So we may see another female figure rise to prominence during this period, and somebody who is perhaps trying to crusade for justice for her own reasons.
I've read my notes, and I think I figured out what's going on. We've got Mars in Gemini at 21 degrees. We have Mercury in Virgo at 24 degrees. We have Neptune at 23 degrees of Pisces. And that means that there is a hole in the square at about 23 degrees of Sagittarius, which in this chart happens to be in the 8th house. So it is going to be very difficult to figure out exactly what the truth is about some event, but this looks a whole lot like Mars trying to impose something by force and being shut down in part by disobedience and in part by the experts coming out and saying, no, this is a terrible idea, and a three-way struggle for power in which who's right and who's wrong is going to be very difficult to determine.
That sounds like it could interact quite interestingly with the Queen of Swords.
Yes, absolutely,
card.
because as we know, the Queen of Swords barometer for BS is extremely sensitive. So, yeah.
So basically, October might be another one of those months where it's going to be really fun to watch the news.
Yeah. And the other part of that Mercury and Virgo energy is that it's got a really strong trine up to Pluto. So we might see fifth house stuff has to do with entertainments like movies and TV shows and intellectual think pieces or puff pieces.
Yeah.
And it's going to be in Mercury in Virgo for the whole of October. So we're likely to see a whole lot of wrestling with underworld themes, and we might get some really good new horror movies out of it, but we might also get some good think pieces that are helping us cope with issues like colonialism or the ancestors or the death and sickness that we've experienced for the last 3 years. There's going to be some coming to terms with that at last, and I think that might be really valuable.
That's really interesting. It's especially so because this Queen of Swords those decans that I mentioned, her decans that she governs, are well occupied, as you were saying, by the Mercury in the final decan, and then the Venus and Sun in the first two decans of Libra. So, I would expect that to whatever those issues are that she is concerned with, probably justice at some level, or the writing of the balances, to be widely communicated across the public sphere. And I do remember that some years ago that during this time of year, I was seeing a lot of Queen of Swords. There was also some astrological placements, and this was during the hearings for Christine Blasey Ford, which, was very much a Queen of Swords figure. And I don't remember the Mercury placement at the time, but you can see how that might play into those energies.
That's great.
Yeah, that is great. We're making really good time this second half of the year. I think primarily because we might be in our groove. I'm not sure how this works. But I do want you guys to remember that, like, we're coming up on the month of my solar return. So hopefully, I haven't looked at November yet. I'm just hoping that I'm going to flip this page and it's going to be all good news. Like, it's going to be all about Eric gets to have a great party. Birthdays are cool this month, that sort of thing.
So I shouldn't mention the fact that we have an eclipse on election day in the United States.
Great.
Is that what you're saying?
Oh God, everything's gonna fall apart. Okay, on into November. Ooh, that is an eclipse. That's all right.
Yeah, it is an eclipse, and on the one hand, the eclipse is happening in Taurus, not entirely on top of the Uranus placement at 17 degrees, but 13. It's within 4 degrees. Depending on how widely you cast your orbs, this could be really rough. Uranus likes to say surprise, so I think
no,
this
Uranus likes to say surprise.
What are we, 12?
Yes, we are. So this is a lunar eclipse, and it's more or less centered on Hawaii, but because of its latitude, it's pretty much visible in part or in whole from the eastern United States all the way to western China.
Wow.
It's one of the larger ones, and it is visible over a vast swath of the earth, Alaska in the north all the way down to New Zealand. So pretty much anywhere in the world and the Western Hemisphere is going to be able to see this, and even some parts of the Eastern Hemisphere. The eclipse is happening while Venus, the Sun, and Mercury are all in Scorpio. And Venus, of course, is our queen of the year, and she's in detriment in Scorpio. I like to think of Venus and Scorpio in people's charts as the woman in the red dress and high heels in the men's locker room, right? She has to put on some kind of an attitude in order to be in that space, right? Mm-hmm. She has to say, "Oh, it's nothing I haven't seen before," or I just couldn't wait to get in here and put my eyes on you, or, more than that. But one way or another, she has to put on bravado or timidity. She has to cop an attitude in that environment. So the sovereign here is in a place where she's not really supposed to be and has to brave it out in some fashion. And the eclipse is happening directly opposite her. And the result is, I think, that something of the normal order gets overthrown. I don't like saying that, but this is looking a whole lot like a November surprise. At the same time that this is happening, Jupiter has retrograded back into Pisces, but is approaching a second conjunction with Neptune in Pisces. And I'm not actually sure if that conjunction goes exact or not, but there's at least the threat that norms and order are somehow overthrown because people just don't care.
Ugh. That's grim, Andrew.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Saturn is the prime minister, and Saturn is in the 7th house in Aquarius, retrograded back into heaven and earth. So there's this idea of we're going to make utopia, and figuring out the practical ways of doing that, not easy. Venus is our monthly governor, but she's, again, in detriment, and she's opposite the eclipse. So altogether, this is a really uncertain combination here, and it says that others have considerably more power than we're used to, and the things that we think of as being the normal sources of power are sort of being overthrown or surprised. So if you think you know the result going into the US election day, you are probably wrong.
That's usually the case, isn't it, these days?
Well, I mean, we've definitely, yeah. And, we've seen that happen before
For sure.
in recent memory in some pretty unpleasant ways.
Unfortunate.
All right. Give us a card, Susie. Shuffle that deck extra well.
I actually did, because they were not. I was not feeling it. I've tried about 12 different cards before I felt one that felt like the right one. So what did I get? Oh, great!
God, it's the tower.
The Five
it's the tower,
of
isn't
Cups.
it? Oh no!
Well, at least two
I like
of
to
them
call
are
that one
still
the
full.
Dracula
Yes,
card.
at least two of them are still full. So yet another cup. We've been seeing a fairly watery energy going on in the second half of the year. So the thing about the Five of Cups is that it there's an inevitability about that card. That river only runs one way, and the same water never passes under that bridge twice. So I do think that there's going to be, I mean, if there isn't literally some form of mourning going on, which is entirely possible that, some public figure passes in an untimely way, and we are all dealing with the after effects of that. It could also be a shock of some sort to the world systems. It could be a financial crash. It could be it could be well, it could also be, if sometimes these cards are just content, and it could just be a remembrance of all the people we've lost to the pandemic. It also happens to be the first decan of Scorpio, which is where the eclipse is taking place, right? Or is it in which part of Scorpio is it taking place in? Second decan,
I believe.
Yeah,
right?
it's happening in the second
okay,
decan.
right. So it looks like right at the beginning of the month we've got Mercury in that first decan of Scorpio. So but there's definitely going to be some of that very goth Scorpio energy going on, and
Wait, hold on. Do I have goth Scorpio energy?
With a beard and mustache like that, and that wall of books behind you, you need to ask that question.
So the answer is no. I have zero goth Scorpio energy.
Yeah, I mean the two minors that are the two majors that are associated with this card are the Tower and Death. So that kind of gives you a sense of the flavor of what's going on.
So I was
here.
close. I was close, and I was like, "Oh, not the tower,
Yes,
not the tower."
yes.
It
I sometimes
was
call
kind
this
of
the Little
halfway.
Tower.
I like to call it the Dracula
It is a very
card.
much a Dracula card, or maybe a vampire card, or there's something about it that's very very much like that. The rising of the undead. I saw this card.
The Transylvanian Red Cross Society would like to ask you for a donation of blood.
I do think that there is something having to do with the themes of the election. It has come up during U.S. election stuff. In the past, it was the card of Trump losing, but it was also a card that came up during the Trump-Clinton election, as I recall. And the thing is that you can't say with elections that even if the Five of Cups, shows up, not everybody is going to be sad, right? Because it's the nature of elections that somebody wins, so their supporters are going to be pleased about it.
Yeah, one would hope. I mean, I feel like sometimes we just get relieved when somebody loses, but it doesn't necessarily make people happy. They're just sort of
What
like,
a
oh my
relief.
God, thank
Yeah.
goodness that other person didn't
Yeah,
win.
I mean, could be worse, but it is
Could be worse.
it is a terribly sobering card, and again because
Mhm.
it's 5 of Cups, I would expect to see news about water as well. Whether it's probably in the form of storms at that time of year.
Yeah, I'm kind of happy about the news of water cards that we've
Yeah,
been getting.
yeah.
Most of the Western United States, in particular, has been dealing with some really, really
That's
brutal
right.
drought,
That's
and
right.
even a flood. At least there's water
Right?
around.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Any other good news you want to give me for my birthday month?
Well,
No.
even if you spill
Okay.
3 pints of beer, you'll still have 2 left over.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Susie. That is a good way to look at all of this news.
We're sorry, Eric.
It could be better.
It's cool. Well, we've been making amazing time, which means that we'll have extra time to talk about December. So it's the home stretch, you guys. The home stretch.
2nd of December, 2022, 5:49 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over a location in Western Massachusetts. Sun at 10 Sagittarius 44. We have Venus in Sagittarius, so she's answering to her most kind and generous advisor, but it's a square relationship, right? Jupiter is in Pisces at 28 degrees of Pisces, and Venus is at 20 degrees, so they're coming into a square relationship. This strikes me as productive conflict, right? Jupiter says, be generous, be victorious, declare your triumph to the people, and the Queen is like, yeah, but I have to do something to that. I have to add my own creative twist to that. And so there's a creative tension between them that I think works out in the favor of working people, retail folks, rank and file in the military, because all of this is happening in the 6th house. So I think that Jupiter is like, you have to be kind to students. And Venus is saying, yeah, but working class people need something too. So I think that there's going to be some kind of last-ditch effort to make the current Congress deliver on some of the promises that helped them win the election in 2020. And that those are going to benefit students on the one hand, or at least I hope they do, and working class people on the other. Saturn is our prime minister for the last month of the year as well, and Jupiter is the monthly governor. So I think that Neptune conjunction that he's just come out of is going to have that relationship with Venus to have that argumentative square. But I think that Saturn in the 8th house of death is saying, nature bats last. Don't count me out. And Saturn has wound up ruling quite a lot of months as the monthly governor, and the pattern for COVID has been that roughly every 2 months there's sort of a resurgence somewhere in the world. It wouldn't surprise me that there are some very favorable conditions among newly opened stores for COVID to have a spread right before Christmas.
Well, yikes.
I'm such a pessimist this year. I'm sorry.
I feel like we got spanked so hard after our first forecast that, like, we're just hedging our bets. We're being pessimistic because the world is telling us to hedge our bets.
It is.
Right. And the truth of it is that we don't want to tell you that everything is going to be fine and hunky-dory if we're concerned. And 3 years have taught us to be more and more and more cautious every year. At this point, would we know a good year when it bit us?
We would only know a good year in retrospect. It'd be like, man, that was so much better than this year. But I mean, honestly, I this is a question that I will ask after we are done with whatever disastrous card Susie's about to pull.
Yeah, I know. So I had the 5 of Cups, I had the 9 of Swords before that. Yeah, it's got to be better, right?
Oh, no. There are some bad ones still in there.
If you keep insisting on putting all of the cards back into the deck, it never actually gets
That's
better.
Right, the odds are the same every single time. All right. Oh, look, it's the King of Cups.
That's a great card.
I really like that. That's great.
I like that card too. That's like Andrew's card, isn't it?
Well, it is a jolly card. It is so this is the King of Cups is a card of first and second decan of Pisces and the last decan of Aquarius. So there's that, and we which makes some sense, I guess. But I think the Pisces placements are all in the third decan, so that's not entirely what we're looking for with this. Anyway, so King of Cups, interesting. Again, because it's a court card, who's going to rise to prominence? It could there's a very good chance it could be an individual, as we saw with the Queen of Wands last year and maybe the Queen of Swords earlier. It could be a public figure who, could be a healer of some kind. Could be Dr. Fauci.
Isn't he already fairly prominent?
He's pretty prominent. It could be somebody, it could have to do with religious or spiritual movements, because that's often the case with King of Cups. Now, we don't know whether there's some kind of leader who's going to arise out of that. But I wouldn't be surprised if we had some kind of religious movement that rose up in the news and kind of hijacked the public attention for a little while.
I'm not entirely sure what to say about that, except that the ascendant for the chart of December is in the first decan of Cancer. So we have one of the water decans, one of the water signs very active. Mm-hmm. We also have Pisces very active, because in this chart we have Jupiter and Neptune just slipping out of arrangement of a conjunction, but we also have the midheaven and the lot of fortune right at the very end of the first decan, which is the labyrinth. Do we go further into this problem, or do we start looking for the exits?
I think what we're going to be looking at is the return of the Fisher King, who will herald the rebirth of King Arthur.
I was going to say that I wouldn't be surprised if there were themes of fish and the ocean and the maritime. Unfortunately, it could be the melting of an ice cap kind of a thing. But
oh my God, the King of Wands could be like a glacier that dies.
King of Cups. Yeah.
Or the King of Cups.
Yeah.
Yes.
Again, with the, so we've got a lot of fire and a lot of water this year. I think that, this could well have to do with, or it could well have to do with another climate summit.
It could. That's true.
That's because there is an idealism to the King of Cups.
Yes.
Yes. And there is also an idealism to Jupiter, and there's an idealism to Neptune. But Neptune is the invisible ruler, and Jupiter is the visible ruler. Right. So in this chart for the 2nd of December, the lunar return chart, that's taking place in the 9th house, which is about occult organizations, but also about religion practiced in community. So I like the idea of some sort of religious leader obtaining some level of prominence in December. Maybe somebody's sermon goes viral,
could well be.
Or something like that. And there's also that square which is a separating square between Venus and Mercury in Sagittarius, and Jupiter in Pisces. So again, there's that creative tension between Venus and Jupiter, who normally get along really well with one another, but having kind of a creative conflict over, should academic institutions and students be prioritized, or should working class people be prioritized? Why not both?
Mhm.
There's like, that's a powerful sermon that the right religious leader might go viral and be raised to national prominence delivering. I have to wait 12 months to find out if I'm right.
I mean, you can always say hello to future Andrew, who you know will be listening to this episode to prepare for our 2023 forecast.
That's
It
true.
would be kind of interesting.
Hi, Andrew.
Yes. It would be kind of interesting to do, a sort of evaluation to see how we did.
Are we going to turn this into
Yeah.
a 3-part episode? One where we review the previous year, and 2 where we forecast the next year?
Let's not promise.
I mean, I feel like if we were going to do that, you could just have one entire podcast that is all about like
Yes,
reviewing, doing the
yes.
forecast, and every month reviewing what the heck happened and how close we were, which would be a very, very interesting experiment, but it is not one that I will be conducting because
A
Life
perfect
is
task for your apprentice.
Yes.
yes, apprentice, get in here.
I have this feeling that your apprentice is named something like Otto.
Yes, Otto Man.
Something like that. Otto Manic.
Well, so we've made it through all the
Yeah.
months. We've made it through every single month next year. Hopefully, personally, the 3 of us also make it through every month next year.
Let's hope.
I think we haven't.
Next
didn't
year
get
in
the
Portland.
tower.
Next year in Portland. Yeah.
Ye-
That would be great.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
We'll have to see if it's Portland, Connecticut, or Portland, Oregon.
what about
Portland,
Portland,
Maine.
Maine?
Or Portland,
Yes.
Maine.
Is there also a Portland,
Probably.
Connecticut?
There is, but it's a very tiny town. Not very tiny. It's across the river from Middletown, where I used to
Oh,
live.
no kidding.
Oh, I've been there. I've been to Middletown.
Great
In
coffee
Connecticut.
house there. I won't endorse them on the air, but great coffee house there.
I was there in like 1999, so I don't think coffee had made it to Middletown yet.
Spoken like a Pacific Northwest coffee snob.
I got to take what I can get. You guys are ganging up on me with all your East Coast stuff.
Well, we get to be punchier because
Um,
it's 3 hours later.
That's true. That's true. And which brings me to the next thing. Like, I know it is getting late out on the East Coast. I'm very glad that we were able to
Yeah.
arrange this, and you guys showed up to do all this. Any thoughts on any like sort of like final wrapping it all up thoughts? I know that in the handout. Oh, we should have talked about the handout in the intro.
So I'll do that briefly, and then
Okay.
and then you can offer criticisms of it. In order to prep for this show, of course, I have to create all of the charts ahead of time, because there's not time to go through and write or generate the charts in the moment and then just look at them blind. So I write up a brief description of each chart and what I saw at first glance. And this will be available to all of Susie's patrons and whoever she chooses to send it to. It'll be available to Eric's crew as well, and it's also going to go out to anybody who's on my mailing list. And you will be able to look at this live alongside of the episode and sort of follow along and see what we're seeing in the chart. But because Susie is drawing the card live, there's a very big difference between you're getting the first read on it and you are also getting my summary of my take on my pre-prepared notes. And I think that there's a little bit of a disconnect between these two methods.
Mhm.
One of them is happening live during the episode as we record it, and the other one is the result of a couple of weeks of preparation. And so there's a bit of a differential between what I wind up saying live and my first impression. And I wonder to what degree the prepared notes represent a better take because it is the divinatory experience, as opposed to me going through the secondary process of looking at the notes, looking at the chart, and trying to reconstruct the thought days or weeks later. I think there's an issue there. I don't know how to resolve it.
I'm not sure that it is something that needs to be resolved. I mean, one of the things that one of the differences between like divination through astrology and divination through tarot is that tarot is very much a fly by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, that's fine. That's good.
But you know what I mean. Yeah.
That's
It is
good.
very much a fly by the seat of your pants. You pull out, you reveal symbol sets that the diviner might be very, very familiar with, but interpretation has to happen there, and intuition comes into it a lot more. So one of the things that I really enjoy about this is it forces both of you to take the other method of divination, the calculated method of divination or the intuitive method of divination, and merge them. So the handout is very, very useful, but it's the sort of thing where, like, when you listen to the episodes, you should have a pen or pencil or lighter ready so that you can take notes or burn the notes.
That's an excellent point, but I certainly hope that the handout will be helpful. But I think that it's also probably worthwhile to have a Rider-Waite or some other tarot deck close at hand that is already in something resembling the quote-unquote original order of the cards, so that you can pull them out and look at them as we're talking about
Or you
them.
can just look them up online on your
Yes.
phone if that's easier.
Right. There's something tactile about the cards.
That's for sure. That's for
Yes.
sure.
Astrology is a whole lot less tactile. I spend some time every day going outside and looking at the actual sky,
Mhm.
but I spend a lot of time looking at charts on a computer screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and well, this time of year, nobody in the Pacific Northwest gets to actually see the sky. So.
Yeah. It's a figment of your imagination. There is no sky, Eric.
Oh,
It's gray. It's just gray, right?
oh,
You guys see it.
there is one thing that we can talk about. Will this episode come out before about the 18th or 19th of December?
No, it'll come out the week
Okay.
after Christmas.
Okay.
Yeah. What were you going to talk about?
Well, I was going to talk about something that is a particular part of my practice, which is that when the sun is in the third decan of Gemini, it's on the shoulders of the constellation Orion, as though Orion were wearing a head.
Oh, cool.
And the same thing
Oh.
happens when the sun is in Sagittarius. This year it's about the 18th or 19th of December, or it was the 18th or 19th. You're listening to this episode after Christmas. Sorry, folks, you missed it.
You can plan ahead for next year.
You can plan ahead for next year, but the sun being in Sagittarius means that the full moon is usually at or near the constellation of Orion. Now,
Oh,
I
okay.
happen to be in Western Massachusetts. We have a lot of muddy skies this time of year, and I noticed this happening, that this would happen, I think in 2012 or 2013, and it has been cloudy every single time that I have been
Oh.
outside since then. So I have not actually physically seen it happen, but I know that it does happen, and I hope that somebody out there will say, "Oh, I saw that. That was really cool. Thanks for pointing it out."
That is
That
really
would be
cool.
pretty cool. Both of you, thank you again so much. This is a delight. I look forward to this every year.
Oh,
And,
it's such fun.
Andrew, thank you for doing. Yeah,
It's enormous
It
fun.
is,
I
it
love
is.
spending time with you both.
Likewise.
the feedback that I always get about these episodes is that the three of us have excellent chemistry when we talk together, which I think is probably solely due to how much talking you guys do and how little talking
Yeah.
I do during these episodes.
But we need you.
We
we need
do.
you to ring the bell
We do.
and set
Oh,
and literally set the tone.
You do set the tone. You leaven the mood.
I do what I can.
That's why his
so
baking
you
is so
can-
much better.
Right. All right. Well, you guys can find T. Susan Chang at tsusanchang.com and Andrew B. Watt at andrewbwatt.com. And I am Reverend Derek, and I'm at arnemancy.com. I hope that you are all stocking up on toilet paper and canned tuna and rice for 2022, because it sounds like it's going to be a tiny bit of a roller coaster ride.
Tiny roller coaster ride. I think that might be an oxymoron.
Just yeah. My podcast is about to go on a 1-month break as I get ready for my next project, which is the Agrippa 3 Books of Occult Philosophy deep dive. So
fantastic.
Yeah, so get ready for that, everybody. It's going to be pretty weird, and hopefully it'll be weird enough that it distracts all of us from whatever happens in 2022. So thank you, and good night.
Good night.
This has been another episode of the Arnemancy Podcast. Thank you for joining me. I have been your host, Reverend Eric. You can find Arnemancy online at arnemancy.com, and you can subscribe to this podcast anywhere podcasts are found. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting the Arnemancy Project for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/arnemancy.